I don't know if you guys do this, but I keep a book that's sort of like story ideas. And it's just sort of this thick book of like just, some of it's just garbage. And some of it's, there's some, I'll flip through it every once in a while and maybe revisit it. And I got an idea for a script that it was all came from, because, movie trailers, in a world, like that was like sort of the idea. Okay. Like, what if, right? We talked about what if there was a world where everything you saw in movie trailers was real. Okay. Like James Bond villains, monsters, space aliens, demons, everything. Yet the main character just wants to live a normal life, but it's physically impossible in this world because, and so that was sort of like the nugget of the idea. Okay, and I was going to call it In a World, right? So I had that idea, but I didn't, no matter how much I pressed it, and I'll get into my writing process in a little bit, I just couldn't get it going. I just couldn't get it going because I knew I had something there. It was a really high concept idea and I didn't want to blow it. So I just really kind of put that away for a while. And it actually took about 2 or 3 years before I revisited it and wound up, I broke the story in my head. Like what was the thing that was going to make this work and what was going to make this special? So the idea was that on the day he meets this girl, like sort of love at first sight, he gets targeted by robots from the future, space aliens, and a James Bond villain. They all want to kill him. Basically, they all want him for some reason. I mean, it's discovered later. So the idea is thematically, I'm a very thematically driven writer. So thematically, it was about the grass is always greener. So here's a guy who lives in this really amazing world where anything is possible, and he just wants to have the most boring, basic life. But he goes on this incredible journey because he's targeted by all these people. And at the end, he's sort of given a choice where he can actually make everything go back the way it is. But he realizes that if he hadn't gone on this journey, he wouldn't have met all these special people, and his life wouldn't have meant anything. So that was sort of what it was about. That was, once I got that theme, once I got that idea, it pretty much wrote itself. And that script got me on the tracking boards 100 up-and-coming writers. Okay, my favorite writers are like Kurt Vonnegut, Stanislaw Lem. I love Douglas Adams, Arthur C. Clarke. But I discovered Clive Barker at a young age. He had these books of blood. They did this big article about it in Fangoria, and I read these things, and I was like, wow, it's really about body horror and really very sexualized horror. But it's very beautiful writing. It's not, I mean, this is not pulp horror. This is like Lovecraftian and so much, and just Stephen King called him the new voice of horror when he came out. So I was really obsessed with Clive Barker. He really got me into horror literature. Well, they announced about a couple of months ago that Clive Barker was going to do this anthology that was a sort of a sequel to one of his novellas called Cabal, which was made into the movie Nightbreed. And they were looking for writers to submit short stories that you needed to take one of the characters from Nightbreed and tell a story after the fall of Midian. So it's called Midian Unmade, Tales from Clive Barker's Nightbreed. They got, I think, over 500 submissions from really some top writers. And I just found out last week that my story was accepted. And they absolutely loved it. And I wrote this short story, and I think it's one of the most beautiful lyrical things I've ever written. And I just knew when I wrote it. I mean, like, I just couldn't conceive that they weren't going to love it. But I could, obviously you can. You know what I mean? You can, of course they're, because this doesn't ever work out. You know what I mean? It's not going to work out. But I just knew I'd written something special. And the publisher told me, there was two publishers told me that when they read it, they knew. They knew, both of them knew that this had to be in the anthology. So I'm going to be doing signings with Clive Barker and the other authors for this anthology. They're going to do special limited editions. They're going to do like European editions and hardcover editions and stuff like that. I mean, this is beyond validating to me as a writer. There's different types of criticism. There's real constructive criticism. I mean, I'm telling you, I love getting great notes. If someone instantaneously if somebody is getting what you're writing. Because the biggest problem is it's understanding where they're coming from when they're giving you notes. Because if someone just gives you a note and it just seems so random and you realize that, well, they don't really get what I'm trying to do with this story, you got to ignore those notes because they see in their head a different story than you're trying to tell. But it's those notes that are like, hey, this really isn't on the page, or I'm not getting this. Those are notes you need to listen to. But I love getting notes when someone says, hey, do you think about doing this? And it's like, oh my God. I haven't gotten notes sometimes. It's like, oh my God. First of all, I'm like, I'm embarrassed I didn't think about that. Or, boy, I wish I came up with that. And I had a script recently where I was mentoring this like 21-year-old, filmmaker who's really fantastic. And he came up with the opening sequence for this action script I was writing. And I totally would give him credit because it's like it was such a great opening. And it really brought the script to a new level. And I don't mind that. You know what I mean? Because that's great. When someone really gets what you're trying to do and they give you that little gem, it's like, run with it. I mean, that's a gift. Those are gifts. Take those. Don't be ashamed to, you're not stealing ideas. Somebody's gifting you that idea. You're a fool not to take it if it's something that you can run with. I mean, obviously, he didn't write the opening sequence. He just gave me an idea, and I actually had to conceive it and write it and make it work, but it was definitely his idea. I would not have come up with that on my own. But I always tell the artist this. I'm like, look, I'm the writer. You're the artist. I'm not here to hinder you. I'm here to give you what I feel needs to be on the page. If you feel like you can do this in less panels or more panels, go for it. Because you're the one who's going to really bring this alive. And you gotta trust who you're working with. And I'm telling you, I'm never disappointed. I mean, especially working on like Logan's Run, I would be like, every time I'd get a page, I'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I mean, just to see your work come alive. It's so amazing. They did audio dramatizations of my first 2 series of Logan's Run, like full cast audio with sound effects. It's crazy. I mean, I'm like listening to like, this is my story, like, and I'm in it. You know what I mean? It's just almost like it's almost the movie, and it's crazy. You know what I mean? So as an artist, when I'm working with artists, I really trust them. I make sure I work with artists who, we understand each other, and I usually let them run with it. If you told me that I would write a nonfiction book, I would say, are you crazy? I'm not going to write a nonfiction book. I wrote this out of like a labor of love. This is the 3rd edition of it. It's actually used in film schools around the world. And it contains interviews with some of the biggest people in the industry, like Bryan Singer, directed X-Men and Usual Suspects, Gail Ann Hurd, who produces The Walking Dead, Tom DeSanto produced all the Transformers movies, and I mean Dustin Lance Black, who won the Oscar for Milk, the screenwriter. I realized that working on a film set, I was a makeup effects artist, and I had to know everything about what was going on around me. I was getting yelled at like all the time. And I went to go find a book. Like, is there a book that kind of tells you all this stuff so I don't get yelled at so much? And there wasn't. There wasn't. There were books for actors, books for directors, books for writers, but there was nothing like, hey, here's just information about film sets. And I was amazed. So I said, oh, I'm going to write it then. And the idea was I was just going to do it as sort of a book you could have in your back pocket. And it was sort of going to be like rules of etiquette on a film set. And just sort of like, hey, here's like the terms you need to know for every department. And this is what everybody does on a set. That was sort of the idea. And then McGraw-Hill got involved with it. And they were like, you know what you should do? You should start interviewing people on set. And so I'm like, well, that's a great idea. And I was working on a lot of the Farrelly Brothers movies. So like Something About Mary, Me, Myself, and Irene, and Shallow Hal. And they're very, very community, very family oriented. So I would just interview people on that and I knew a lot of people from the Sci-Fi Academy. I knew people I went to film school with and, just started collecting this information and put this book together. And it was amazing, like the amount of love that came towards this book because people recognized immediately that this was something important. This was something that was meaningful. And for me, it was never about the money for this. It was always, that's why, third edition of it. I still do it because I say that, most nonfiction books don't have a theme. But if on the set, the third edition had a theme, it's that everybody's got a story. That's what's amazing. And that's one of the things that, I'm always continuing to learn. And I learned a lot writing this book where it's amazing to me how some people get into the industry and none of them are the same. So, that's the interesting thing is you actually have interest in working in the film business. It's not what you think it is. It's not this 80s idea of working in film, where people think it's like, oh, you got the producers and the executive. It's not. Nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody's trying. It's true. It's not. It's true. It's like everybody's scared of losing their job. Everybody's scared of saying yes, and trust me, I've been told that I haven't gotten jobs because if you screw up, I can hire this big screenwriter. And if he screws up, it's like, who'd have thought he would screw up? But if I hire you and you screw up, I lose my job. Is that a reason not to get a job? Because someone's afraid that you're going to screw up and lose their job? How do you, so I always say that it's like, there are no rules, so stop acting like there are. I get asked a lot, like, what is the one thing, that you've worked on that you're most proud of? And I'm proud of all of it. But if I really had to choose one, it would be Discord. Because that, to me, is a full expression of who I am as a writer and as a storyteller. And I'm going to give you the pitch of what it's about, okay? And you can understand how my brain works, okay? Because this came from one of those kernels from heaven, where you're like, yes, that's my idea. You have a superhero team, not unlike the X-Men or the Avengers, not reinventing the wheel. They're fighting their enemy out in space, and they crash land on an alien planet. They're all killed. Body parts everywhere. The indigenous life forms on the planet come out of the woodwork, and they see all these body parts, and they're curious. So they grab all the usable bits and reassemble and resurrect what they think is a human. Okay, so the main character wakes up to realize that not only is he made up of parts of his fallen teammates, he's also made up of parts of his enemy. And thematically, it's about loss of identity. It's about how you define yourself as a hero, and it's that you're not defined by your powers. It's a fascinating what if. This is not his fault. The world seems to hate him, and there's an attack on Washington, and he's got to decide whether he's going to step up and be the hero he once was. To me, it's everything I love about storytelling. It's got really strong themes. It's science fiction. It's horror. It's got Frankenstein. It's sort of a new take on the Frankenstein tale. It's got, superheroes and comic book, that sort of, storytelling. It's got true human emotions. That's the thing I'm most proud of. It's in a very adult story told in a emotionally consistent way. That how would people and how would he react in these situations? So, those are the type of stories I love to tell. And that just came from the idea of what happened, what if a superhero came back and they were like Frankenstein? This will be interesting. Why don't I do this prequel series called Tales of Discord? I'll get 5 different artists and I'll write stories about each of them leading up to the events of Discord. But they're not origin stories. I didn't want to fall into that. The obvious thing is to just do like origin stories. Boring, right? What I wanted to do is I wanted I wanted to tell interesting thematic stories about each of these characters so you really understood them. Okay, and one's about like sibling rivalry, and one's about fame, and one's about teamwork. But one of them is a lesbian, okay? And you find this out in Discord. She has a lover. And so I decided to tell this Iridian comic book, and what it is it's about this young girl trying to come to terms with her sexuality and finding out that she's a hero with parents that were not supportive at all. And it's really had harmed her as an individual to the point where she just wanted just to be, just to go away and crawl away somewhere, right? And when she does come out as a hero, she's embraced by the world. And that allows her to be comfortable with her sexuality. So I'm a straight male writing a female lesbian character. This was a terrifying thing for me to do because I did not want to be incensed. I did not want this to feel like this was a character who I loved and cared about and understood 100%. And I did not want to tell a story that was going to be pandering or just like it felt like a cash grab. But I wanted to tell the story. Well, the gay and lesbian community got behind this comic book, and the Huffington Post did a big article on it, and I got these beautiful emails, and this woman, I got all choked up, whatever. She makes this beautiful jewelry, and she made me this piece that says, "Only a true hero creates heroes." And she was like, I wish I had this comic when I was a kid, to know that I could write something that could affect positive change and be positive for people. It's amazing, because isn't that what we want as writers? We want to write something that's going to inspire and mean something. I watch a movie every day of my life, sometimes 2 or 3 movies a day. And I was like, well, why don't I review this? Would be fun. As a writing exercise, I wonder if I could post a movie a day. It could be something that's in the theater, or it could be something that I just watched. And it could go from I reviewed all 12 Friday the 13th movies. But I also recommend movies in every genre because I love movies. I own over 1,500 movies on DVD and Blu-ray. People are like, how do you find the time in the day? I do. And I have 2 kids and a wife, and I cook dinner every night, and I spend time with them. And I have time to do crazy stuff and write and read and watch movies because I love it. We live in the greatest time. Anybody can make a movie now with your phone, okay? You're only limited by your imagination and your ability to get off your butt and do it, okay? Social networking, you can make a movie and put it on YouTube. You can write a book and sell it, okay? You can self-publish it. You can make an ebook, and it doesn't cost you anything, okay? That's what's so great. It doesn't cost you anything to write, to type something. You know what I mean? So there's nothing holding you back other than you. So you can write something and you could put it up on a website for free, okay? And if people love it, then you write something else and someone's going to buy it. You know what I mean? That's the thing is, it's not always about the first thing you do. Sometimes you do something and it's that next thing that you have the success with. But if you don't start, you're never going to get anywhere. So, yes. You just got to do it. You got to do it. You don't got to talk about it. You need to do it. And that's coming from somebody who does it all the time. I'm working on 5 projects simultaneously. It just takes one of those things to happen. They all might fall apart. They all might be meaningless. But it's the possibility, right? Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate your time.